Leon Whitfield was 38 years old, and for 3 years he had not slept a full night. He worked an HVAC route by day, supervised a warehouse on weekends, and drove strangers across the city until past midnight, all to pay off $74,000 in debt his wife Crystal had hidden from him until the ink on their marriage certificate was barely dry. He never complained, never demanded gratitude. He told himself this was what love looked like when things got hard. That afternoon, his warehouse shift was canceled early. He came home quietly, planning to sleep for a few hours before his next shift. That was when he heard Crystal's voice through the bedroom door, warm, laughing, completely at ease. He stopped walking, and then the words hit him like a closed fist. She was describing him to someone, his 3 jobs, his exhaustion, his devotion, and she was laughing. "He's my slave," she said, "and the man doesn't even know it." Leon stood in that hallway for a long time. When he finally moved, it wasn't toward the door. It was toward his car. And what he decided in that silence would cost Crystal everything she thought she had already won. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around Leon's rideshare vehicle like a familiar blanket. At 4:47 a.m., the parking lot of Jerry's all-night diner was empty, except for his car and a single delivery truck. The sharp aroma of coffee drifted from his travel mug as he unwrapped his breakfast sandwich, his movements precise and unhurried. 3 different alarms lived on his phone, one for each job. The HVAC alarm would sound at 6:30 a.m., the warehouse supervisor alarm at 4:00 a.m. on weekends, and the rideshare alarm at varying times whenever he could squeeze in extra hours. He had learned to function on carefully planned 90-minute sleep cycles, timing them between shifts with the exactness of someone who understood that rest was now a resource to be managed. Leon took a deliberate bite of his sandwich, his mind already running through the day's schedule. The sandwich was nothing special, egg and cheese on a slightly stale bagel, but it was fuel, and he had learned to think of everything in terms of function rather than pleasure. The diner's neon sign cast a reddish glow across his weathered hands, hands that had once drawn complex engineering schematics, but now mostly gripped steering wheel and HVAC tools. 3 years ago, Crystal had come to him with tears in her eyes and fear in her voice. They'd been married for 8 months when she finally confessed to the $74,000 in debt she'd been hiding. Credit card balances, a defaulted private loan, back taxes from a business venture gone wrong. The numbers had spilled out of her between sobs. He remembered how she'd clutched his hand, how her mascara had left black streaks on her cheeks. He hadn't shouted, hadn't accused, hadn't done any of the things she'd clearly been expecting. Instead, he'd pulled out a notepad and started making calculations. By morning, he had a plan. Within a week, he'd submitted his resignation to the engineering firm and taken the HVAC job that kept him closer to home. The warehouse position followed, then the rideshare driving. In the quiet of his car, Leon pulled out his small leather journal, a habit he'd maintained since his engineering days. Inside were neat columns of numbers, schedules, and payments. He'd reduced their debt by $47,000 so far. Each payment was carefully noted, each extra shift documented. The pages told a story of systematic sacrifice, of love expressed through exhaustion and perseverance. The coffee was growing cold, but he drank it anyway. Crystal had bought him an expensive coffee maker last Christmas. "So you can at least have good coffee with all these early mornings," she'd said. He'd thanked her, knowing the money had come from the extra shifts he'd picked up in December. At 5:15 a.m., he started the car. The drive home was quiet, street lights casting intermittent shadows across the dashboard. He'd learned every pothole, every timing of every traffic light. Efficiency wasn't just about money anymore. It was about stealing moments of rest wherever he could find them. The house came into view at 6:15 a.m., a two-story colonial that Crystal had fallen in love with during their house hunting. The mortgage payments were manageable on what used to be his engineering salary alone. Now they were another careful line item in his journal, another reason for the 3 jobs. He pulled into the driveway with practiced silence, killing the engine before it could echo off the garage door. The pre-dawn light was just starting to soften the darkness, casting everything in shades of blue-gray. Crystal's luxury SUV sat in its usual spot, the one she used to show properties to high-end clients. Inside, the house was still and quiet. Leon moved through the hallway like a ghost, noting the new decorative lamp on the console table. It was elegant, probably expensive, with a crystalline base that caught what little light there was. He didn't remember discussing its purchase, but then again, he was rarely home when Crystal was awake these days. A memory surfaced as he passed their wedding photo on the wall. Crystal laughing at some joke he'd made during their first date, calling him her rock, with that sparkle in her eyes that made him feel 10 feet tall. He touched the frame lightly, straightening it, even though it didn't need straightening. The shower was quick and efficient, another carefully budgeted piece of his morning routine. He changed into his HVAC uniform, the fabric still crisp from Crystal's careful ironing. She did little things like that sometimes, gestures that reminded him why he'd made all these choices. At 6:45 a.m., Leon backed out of the driveway, glancing once in the rearview mirror at the house he'd been funding alone for 3 years. He was tired, but not broken. The day was just beginning, and he had work to do. Saturday mornings usually meant the steady rhythm of the warehouse, but today was different. A system-wide outage had shut down operations, sending workers home just 2 hours into their shifts. Leon sat in his car outside their colonial house at 10:47 a.m., an unexpected pocket of time stretching before him. 3 hours of potential sleep before his evening rideshare shift, a gift he hadn't planned for. The morning sun cast warm patches across the driveway where Crystal's SUV sat. She must be working from home today, he thought, preparing listings or catching up on paperwork. These quiet moments, when their schedules unexpectedly aligned, were rare now, almost precious in their scarcity. Leon moved with practiced quietness through the front door, his warehouse boots held in one hand to avoid making noise on the hardwood floors. The house felt still, wrapped in the kind of silence that made even breathing seem loud. A half-empty coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter. Crystal's favorite, the one with gold rim she'd bought during their weekend in Charleston. He was halfway up the stairs when he heard it. Crystal's voice, drifting from behind their closed bedroom door. She was laughing, the sound bright and unrestrained in a way he hadn't heard in months. Leon paused, not wanting to interrupt what sounded like a personal call, but then her words cut through the air with devastating clarity. "Girl, I don't even have to think about money anymore," Crystal was saying, her tone warm with amusement. "Leon handles everything. The bills, the debt, all of it. He's out here working 3 jobs, and I'm just living. He genuinely thinks this is a marriage." Leon's hand, which had been reaching for the doorknob, froze in midair. The laughter from both Crystal and whoever was on the other end of the call felt like needles against his skin. "I keep telling Troy the same thing," Crystal continued, completely unaware of her audience. "Leon is basically my employee at this point. My little worker bee. I never even have to ask. He just does it. Troy." The name hung in the air like smoke. Leon had never heard it before, yet Crystal spoke it with the easy familiarity of long acquaintance. "He's my slave," Crystal said, the words falling like heavy stones in the quiet hallway. "And the man doesn't even know it." More laughter bubbled through the phone line. Crystal's voice dropped lower, taking on a conspiratorial tone. "The secret account is growing nicely, too. All that extra income from his warehouse over time? He thinks it's going to the debt. But I've been moving it around, building my own safety net. You should see the plans Troy and I have been making." Leon stood absolutely still, his body becoming as quiet as his mind suddenly was. He noticed everything with strange clarity. The new carpet runner in the hallway, probably purchased with money he'd earned during those long night shifts. The fresh flowers in the vase by the window. He'd assumed they were from a client. The faint scent of unfamiliar cologne lingering in the air. "Base funding," Crystal was saying now, the words flowing easily as water. "That's what I call it when Troy asks. Leon's income is my base funding while I build something real. Something that doesn't include—" She paused, then laughed again. "Well, you know." Every sacrifice of the past 3 years crystallized in that moment. The abandoned engineering career, the carefully planned sleep schedule, the missed family events, the gradual dissolution of friendships he no longer had time to maintain. Each choice he'd made, thinking it was an investment in their shared future, now revealed itself as something else entirely. With movements so controlled they were almost mechanical, Leon backed away from the door. His feet found each floorboard that wouldn't creak. Knowledge earned through countless pre-dawn departures. Down the stairs, through the hallway, past the kitchen with its half-empty coffee mug that now seemed like evidence of a crime. The morning sun still warmed the driveway as Leon slid into his car. He sat there, key in the ignition, hands resting perfectly still on the steering wheel. His breathing was steady. His face showed nothing. Inside his chest, something that had been straining to hold its shape for 3 years finally closed with an almost audible click. He reached for his phone, opened the Notes app he used to track his schedules, and typed a single line. "Today is day 1. The engine turned over quietly when he started it. Leon pulled out of the driveway with the same careful precision he applied to everything else in his life. His jaw was set, his expression composed, as though he'd just completed a routine task instead of witnessing the collapse of his entire marriage. The house grew smaller in his rearview mirror, and for the first time in 3 years, Leon didn't feel tired at all. Leon pulled into the driveway at exactly 7:15 p.m., right on schedule. The house glowed warmly from within, and through the kitchen window he could see Crystal moving around, probably finishing dinner preparations. His muscles felt heavy with exhaustion, but his mind was sharp, focused in a way it hadn't been for years. He walked through the front door, hanging his keys on their usual hook. "Something smells good," he called out, his voice carrying the same warmth it always did. The performance felt strange, not because it was difficult, but because it came so naturally. Crystal appeared in the doorway, wine glass in hand. "I made that chicken you like," she said, smiling. "The one with the lemon sauce." "You didn't have to do that," Leon replied, moving to kiss her cheek. The gesture, once automatic with affection, now felt like a carefully calculated move in a complex game. He noticed how she leaned into it, completely unaware that anything had changed. Over dinner, Leon asked all the right questions. How was her day? Any progress on the Miller listing? Had she heard back about the Riverside property? He watched her talk, animated and confident, describing her latest deals and client meetings. Every few minutes, she'd touch her phone when it buzzed, smiling at messages he couldn't see. "The market's really picking up," Crystal said, taking another sip of wine. "I might have something big coming up soon." She reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Thanks for holding everything down while I build this baby. I couldn't do it without you." Leon smiled, squeezed back. "That's what partners do," he said, and watched her face for any sign of discomfort at the word partners. There was none. Her ability to compartmentalize was remarkable, he thought. Engineering-grade precision in its own way. They cleaned up together, falling into their usual rhythm. Him washing, her drying. They watched an episode of the show they'd been following, Crystal curled against him on the couch. By 10:30, she was yawning. "Coming to bed?" she asked, stretching as she stood. "In a bit," he said. Got some emails to catch up on first. Crystal nodded, unsurprised. His work ethic had always been convenient for her. Don't stay up too late, she said, heading upstairs. Leon waited, listening to the familiar sounds of her nighttime routine. Water running, drawers opening and closing, the soft creak of their bed. By 11:15, her breathing had settled into the steady rhythm of sleep. He opened his laptop, logging into their joint account. The interface was familiar. He'd been managing their finances for years, but tonight he looked at it with new eyes. Not as a husband trying to keep their ship afloat, but as an engineer examining a system's architecture. The transfers appeared random at first glance. $425 here, $750 there, sometimes just $200, small enough to seem insignificant in isolation. But Leon was good with patterns, and these had one. They always occurred 2 days after his warehouse overtime payments cleared. He created a spreadsheet, documenting each transfer methodically. The total made him sit back in his chair. $11,347 over 18 months, all to an account number he didn't recognize. He photographed each transaction screen with his phone, filing them in a newly created folder. The hotel charges were next. 3 different occasions when Crystal was supposedly at real estate conferences. He cross-referenced the dates with his calendar app where he'd noted her work events. The locations didn't match. Neither did the restaurants. Expensive places he'd never heard of. Charges for 2 on nights she'd told him she was working late. One weekend particularly stood out. A spa resort charge from 2 months ago when she'd said she was at a professional development seminar. The amount made him pause. $897 for a couple's package. He documented everything, his fingers moving steadily over the keyboard. The engineer in him appreciated the methodology of it all, gathering data, establishing patterns, building a complete picture of the system's operation. At 5:45 a.m., sitting in his parked car outside the diner where he usually ate breakfast, Leon called Aunt Georgia. He recounted everything: Crystal's phone conversation, the account discoveries, the pattern of deception, in precise, measured tones. Aunt Georgia listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I need you to answer something for me, baby. Do you want to feel better tonight? Or do you want to be free forever?" "I want to be free," Leon said, his voice steady. "But first, I want her to understand exactly what she's done." "Then stop thinking like a hurt husband," Aunt Georgia said firmly. "Start thinking like an engineer. What do engineers do when they find a broken system?" "They analyze every component," Leon replied, something clicking into place in his mind. "Document every failure point. Understand exactly how it operates before they shut it down." "That's right. You've got the skills for this, Leon. Use them." After hanging up, Leon sat quietly in his car, watching the sun rise over the diner's roof. He opened a fresh note on his phone and began to type. Assets to document. All bank statements, joint and personal, last 3 years, credit card statements, property deed, investment accounts, tax returns, work contracts, salary documentation, overtime payment records, to obtain, phone records, email access, security camera footage from warehouse, confirm my work hours, professional license verification, Crystal's real estate, credentials, property records, any hidden purchases. The list grew, each item another data point in the system he was preparing to analyze. He wasn't angry anymore. He was focused. The glass and steel building gleamed in the midday sun as Leon pulled into the visitor parking space. He straightened his tie, the same one he'd worn during his last engineering presentation 3 years ago, and checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. His face showed no trace of the exhaustion that came from working 3 jobs. Today, he looked like the engineer he'd always been. Walking through the familiar lobby of Walter Banks's firm brought back memories of late-night project meetings and breakthrough moments. The security guard recognized him, offering a warm smile and a visitor badge without needing to check his ID. "Mr. Banks is expecting you on 12, she said. The elevator ride gave Leon time to settle into the role he needed to play. Not the overworked husband seeking escape, but the professional reconnecting with an old mentor. The doors opened to a floor that hadn't changed. Same geometric carpet, same glass-walled offices, same energy of focused innovation. Walter Banks stood when Leon entered his corner office, coming around his desk with genuine warmth. "Leon Whitfield," he said, gripping Leon's hand firmly. "3 years is too long." They settled into comfortable chairs by the window, overlooking the city. Walter had ordered lunch, sandwiches from the deli that had been Leon's favorite when he worked here. The familiar detail touched him unexpectedly. "So," Walter said, unwrapping his sandwich, "tell me what you've been up to." Leon gave him the sanitized version: HVAC work, management experience, system optimization. He watched Walter's face carefully, noting the slight furrow in his brow that appeared whenever talent was being wasted. "You know," Walter said after a while, setting down his sandwich, "we've had a senior project manager position open for 2 years. 2 years?" Leon kept his voice casual. "That's unusual for this firm." Walter's eyes met his directly. "I've been waiting for the right person. Someone who understands both the engineering and the human elements. Someone who can see systems within systems." He paused. "I've been waiting for you to come back, Leon." The words landed exactly as Walter intended. Leon felt something shift inside him. Not hope exactly, but confirmation. A piece of his larger plan clicking into place. "The position comes with a significant salary increase," Walter continued. "Full benefits, of course. The team is solid. You'd know some of them from before. Start date could be flexible." "How flexible?" Leon asked, his mind already calculating timelines. 6 weeks out would work. We have a major project ramping up then." Walter leaned back. "But I should warn you. There would be some travel involved. Maybe 2 weeks per quarter." Leon nodded, keeping his expression thoughtful rather than eager. "I'd need to discuss it with Crystal," he said, the lie smooth and necessary. "Of course," Walter agreed. "Take your time." Later that week, Leon sat in a different office, this one belonging to Patricia Chen, a family law attorney recommended through a careful chain of connections. The office was smaller, warmer, with diplomas on the walls instead of engineering awards. "Financial misconduct in marriage takes many forms," Patricia explained, her voice steady and professional. "Hidden accounts, undisclosed debt, misappropriation of joint funds, these all factor into equitable distribution during divorce proceedings." Leon paid in cash, the bills coming from an account he'd opened at 19 and never mentioned to Crystal. He scheduled a second appointment for later that week. At home, he moved through his days with precise attention to detail. He brought Crystal coffee in the morning, asked about her listings, listened to her client stories with apparent interest. When she mentioned wanting to try a new restaurant, he made reservations immediately. He performed devotion so convincingly that she began to relax into it, accepting his attention as her due. "Leon's really been stepping it up lately," he overheard her tell Adrienne during their Sunday brunch. She said it with the satisfaction of someone who believed they had successfully trained a pet. Her certainty that his behavior meant contentment would prove to be her most costly miscalculation. At his second meeting with Patricia Chen, Leon placed a thick folder on her desk. "Everything's documented," he said quietly. "Bank statements, transfers, hotel receipts, timestamps, locations." He watched as she opened the folder, her expression shifting from professional neutrality to something deeper as she turned each page. The evidence was methodical, overwhelming in its detail. When she finally looked up, her face held the quiet gravity of someone who recognized they were looking at something far more significant than a standard divorce case. "Mr. Whitfield," she said carefully, "you've been very thorough." Leon's phone buzzed while he was reviewing documentation in his parked car outside the HVAC shop. Philip's name appeared on the screen. Crystal's younger brother. They hadn't spoken directly in months. "Leon!" Philip's voice carried an edge of discomfort. "Do you have time to meet? Somewhere private?" He paused. Without Crystal knowing? Something in Philip's tone made Leon sit straighter. "When?" "Today, if possible." "It's important." Leon suggested Ray's barber shop, a place he'd frequented for years, where the whir of clippers and random conversation provided natural cover for difficult conversations. Philip agreed to meet in an hour. The barber shop was quiet when Leon arrived, just Ray working on one customer while sports played on the wall-mounted TV. Philip was already there, sitting stiffly in one of the waiting chairs, his phone gripped tightly in his hands. "Thanks for coming," Philip said as Leon sat beside him. His face carried the strained look of someone who hadn't slept well. "I've been trying to figure out how to handle this for weeks." He unlocked his phone and pulled up a group chat. Leon recognized the names immediately. Crystal, Adrian, and Sarah from Crystal's office. Philip's name was there too, though his responses were sparse. "I should have shown you sooner," Philip said, handing Leon the phone. "Just read." The messages stretched back over a year. Leon scrolled slowly, his expression unchanging as the content revealed itself. Crystal, 8 months ago. Had to remind Leon to wear the good suit to the firm dinner. I swear that blue-collar energy just radiates off him sometimes. Adrian, at least he cleans up nice. Crystal, when properly managed. He kept scrolling. The timestamps jumped forward. Crystal, Troy says I should be ready to make partner at Sewell & Associates within 2 years. The commissions alone would set me up perfectly. Sarah, what about Leon? Crystal, what about him? I just need him stable for another year, maybe 18 months. Then I can let him go. He's been useful. I'm not carrying that working-class anchor forever. Adrienne, Crystal, that seems harsh. Crystal, it's practical. He served his purpose. I needed someone reliable to clean up my finances, and he did that. But I'm not spending my best years pretending to be satisfied with a man who works 3 jobs just to keep up. The messages continued. Crystal mocking his warehouse uniform. Crystal describing him as temporary to potential business partners. Crystal and Sarah laughing about how he still thought they had a real marriage. Leon kept his breathing steady as he documented everything. Each screenshot carefully saved, each timestamp noted. His hands remained perfectly still, despite the weight of what he was reading. Ray's clippers buzzed in the background. ESPN analysts debated player statistics. The ordinary world continued while Leon absorbed proof of just how thoroughly his wife had harvested his devotion while planning his disposal. Philip sat in miserable silence until Leon finished. I tried to tell her once that she was wrong, he said finally. She shut me down hard, told me to stay in my lane. He met Leon's eyes directly. I should have come to you sooner. I'm sorry, man. Leon studied Crystal's brother, really looked at him for the first time. He saw the guilt that had been eating at him, the decent man underneath who couldn't stomach complicity any longer. Thank you for showing me, Leon said quietly. He reached out and shook Philip's hand firmly. Now, I need you to do one more thing for me. What? When the time comes, and you'll know when, I need you to be present. To witness. Leon's voice was calm, certain. Can you do that? Philip didn't hesitate. Yes, whatever you need. They sat for a moment longer, listening to the barbershop's ambient noise, 2 men who had found unexpected alliance in ugly truth. Outside in his car, Leon opened his evidence folder, now thick with bank statements, receipts, and screenshots. He added the new photos methodically, each one properly labeled and dated. In his Notes app, he typed 2 words, almost ready. The forensic financial consultant's office was meticulously organized, with filing cabinets lining the walls and multiple monitors displaying spreadsheet software. Ms. Chen, the consultant, had the focused demeanor of someone who found satisfaction in uncovering financial truths, no matter how uncomfortable. Leon placed his folder on her desk. Every bank statement, receipt, and transaction record he'd gathered over the past weeks, carefully organized by date. "I need to understand exactly what I've been paying for," he said quietly. Ms. Chen nodded, opening the folder with practiced efficiency. "Let's start with the original debt structure, $74,000 total, correct?" "That's what she told me after we married." Leon watched as she began creating digital entries, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. For the next 4 hours, they dissected every document. Ms. Chen cross-referenced account numbers, traced payment patterns, and pulled public records. She built a timeline on one monitor while maintaining a detailed spreadsheet on another. Leon sat beside her, answering questions precisely and noting every discovery. The pattern emerged slowly at first, then with increasing clarity. Regular payments to a holding company, travel expenses to specific locations, restaurant charges at high-end establishments, a $5,000 business investment that had no corresponding business documentation. "Mr. Whitfield," Ms. Chen said finally, turning to face him, "I need to show you something." She pulled up a series of records. "This holding company, Sewell Development LLC, appears repeatedly in the original debt structure. Would you recognize that name?" "Troy Sewell," Leon said, his voice steady. "I learned about him recently." Ms. Chen nodded. "Based on these records, approximately $19,000 of the original debt traces directly to transactions involving Mr. Sewell or his business interests. Travel to locations where he had properties under development, gifts purchased from high-end retailers on dates matching his documented presence in the city, and this $5,000 investment in one of his early LLCs." Leon sat perfectly still, absorbing the implications. For 3 years, he had worked 3 jobs to pay off debt that included funding his wife's relationship with another man, a relationship that predated their marriage. "The timeline is clear," Ms. Chen continued, highlighting specific transactions. "These expenses began approximately 8 months before your wedding date. The pattern suggests a sustained personal and professional connection." Leon studied the screen, memorizing dates and amounts. He had been paying off the evidence of Crystal's betrayal before he even knew it existed. Every extra shift, every missed night of sleep, every sacrifice he'd made had partly served to erase the financial footprints of her deception. "Would you like me to prepare a formal report?" Ms. Chen asked, watching his face carefully. "Yes," Leon said, "as detailed as possible. My attorney will need it." That evening, Leon sat across from Crystal at their dining room table. She talked about a new listing while he ate methodically, his expression pleasant and engaged. She had no way to know that behind his calm exterior, he was calculating exactly how many hours of his labor had funded her betrayal. After Crystal went to bed, Leon sat in his home office and made 3 calls. First, to Walter Banks. "I'd like to confirm that start date we discussed. 6 weeks from Monday?" "Yes, that works perfectly." Second, to his attorney. "The forensic report will be ready tomorrow. I'll bring it by your office." Finally, to Aunt Georgia. "I need to tell you what I learned today." He recounted everything to his aunt, his voice never wavering. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I have something for you," she said finally. "A name. Beaumont Aldridge. He's Troy's silent partner, the one who actually funds those developments. Old money, very conscious of his reputation, very particular about who he does business with." Leon wrote the name down. "You're sure about this?" "I know people who know people," Aunt Georgia said. "Mr. Aldridge values his good name above everything else. If someone were to bring certain information to his attention, well, that would be his business to handle." Leon studied the name for 2 days. He thought about consequences, about systems, about the precise application of pressure. He thought about Crystal's voice through that bedroom door, calling him her slave. He thought about 3 years of working through exhaustion to pay off the price tag of her affair. On the third morning, he picked up his phone. He dialed the number Aunt Georgia had given him. 2 rings cut through the silence. Beaumont Aldridge speaking. The voice was measured, unhurried, the voice of a man who had built his reputation carefully and guarded it the same way. Crystal practically floated down the stairs that morning, her silk robe flowing behind her like a victory banner. Leon was already at the kitchen table, reading the news on his tablet while his coffee cooled. "I got it!" Crystal's voice rang with triumph. "The Westbrook property! 1.4 million, Leon. This is going to be my biggest commission ever." Leon looked up, his smile perfectly calibrated. "That's wonderful, honey. Congratulations." Crystal poured herself coffee, adding a precise amount of cream. "Troy says this could be a game-changer for my career trajectory. Once people see me handling properties at this level—" She paused, basking in the moment. "We should celebrate." "Whatever you'd like," Leon said, his voice warm and accommodating. Crystal sat across from him, unusually animated. "I've been thinking, we haven't had a real vacation in forever. Maybe we could go somewhere nice once this deal closes? The commission would more than cover it." Leon reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "That sounds nice. We'll plan something." What Crystal couldn't see, as she happily outlined potential destinations, was that Leon had already set several wheels in motion that week. His direct deposit information had been quietly updated at all 3 jobs. The changes wouldn't register for 2 pay cycles, but soon every dollar would flow into his personal account, one Crystal didn't know existed. In his attorney's office downtown, a thick manila folder held divorce papers awaiting his signature. The forensic accountant's report sat beside them, along with documented evidence of Crystal's ongoing deception. The timing was precise. Everything would be ready to file exactly when the maximum impact would land. Across town, in a corner office with a view of the city, Beaumont Aldridge was reviewing certain business arrangements with new attention. The quiet, dignified investor had begun asking pointed questions about Troy Sewell's financial structures, documentation practices, and partner relationships. Troy, unaware of the catalyst for this scrutiny, was finding himself increasingly uncomfortable under Aldridge's measured gaze. Crystal spent the week riding her success, her confidence radiating through every room she entered. She invited Adrienne over for dinner on Thursday, wanting to share her triumph with her closest friend. Leon played his part flawlessly. He grilled steaks to perfection, kept wine glasses full, and participated in conversation with genuine warmth. He asked about Adrienne's children, remembered details from previous discussions, and laughed at all the right moments. "You two seem so happy," Adrienne said, as Crystal walked her to the door later that evening. "It's nice to see." Once she was in her car, Adrienne pulled out her phone and called Crystal. "That man loves you," she said, her voice carrying a weight Crystal didn't register. "I hope you know what you have." Crystal's laugh was light and dismissive. "Oh, I know exactly what I have." The words carried her usual confidence, but their meaning was entirely different from what Adrienne intended. To Crystal, what she had was a reliable support system, a funding source for her ambitions, a faithful worker maintaining her lifestyle while she built something bigger. Later that night, Leon lay awake beside Crystal's sleeping form. The bedroom was dark except for thin strips of streetlight filtering through the blinds. He studied the ceiling, conscious of a private grief completing itself in his chest. He thought about the man he had been 3 years ago, the one who believed sacrifice was love's purest form, the one who had taken on 3 jobs without complaint, believing his exhaustion was building something meaningful. That man had been real. His love had been real. His dedication had been genuine and complete. Leon allowed himself to mourn that man quietly, thoroughly, knowing this was the last time he would need to. He acknowledged the depth of what he had given, the sincerity of his commitment, and the crushing weight of discovering it had all been harvested as a resource rather than received as a gift. The grief moved through him like a tide, full, heavy, and then gradually receding. When it finished, he felt lighter, cleaner. The last threads of his old life detached themselves, leaving him perfectly ready for what came next. Crystal shifted in her sleep, unaware of the transformation completing itself beside her. Leon closed his eyes, entirely at peace. Everything was in position. Every piece was placed exactly where it needed to be. Crystal descended the stairs at 9:30, her silk robe trailing behind her. She stopped abruptly at the kitchen doorway. Leon sat at the table, fully dressed in a crisp navy suit she didn't recognize, a manila folder placed precisely in front of him. 2 coffee cups steamed on the table, one by his hand, one across from him, waiting. "You're home?" Crystal's voice carried a note of confusion. "Is everything okay?" "I took the day off," Leon said quietly. "Please, sit down." Something in his tone, the complete absence of his usual warmth, made Crystal hesitate. She pulled her robe tighter and slowly took the seat across from him. The doorbell rang. "That'll be Aunt Georgia," Leon said, his eyes never leaving Crystal's face. Crystal's spine stiffened. "Why is your aunt coming here at this hour?" Leon didn't answer. He stood, walked to the front door, and opened it. Aunt Georgia stepped inside, her face set in lines of granite determination. She nodded once at Leon, then walked past Crystal without acknowledgement, taking a seat in the corner armchair. Her silence filled the room like smoke. The doorbell rang again. This time, Crystal stood up. "What is happening right now?" Philip walked through the door, his usual easygoing expression replaced with something heavier. Crystal took a step back. "Philip, what are you doing here?" Her voice sharpened. "Why are you here with them?" "Sit down, Crystal," Leon said. The words were quiet, but carried an authority she'd never heard from him before. Crystal remained standing, her eyes darting between the 3 faces turned toward her. "I don't understand what this is, but if you're trying to—" "3 weeks ago," Leon cut in, his voice level, "you had a phone conversation in our bedroom. You thought I was at the warehouse. I wasn't." He opened the folder. "You said some interesting things that day. Would you like me to quote them exactly?" The color drained from Crystal's face. "You told someone, Adrienne, I believe, that I was basically your employee, that I was your worker bee, that I genuinely thinks this is a marriage." Leon's voice remained eerily calm. "But the most interesting part was when you called me your slave. Do you remember that part, Crystal?" "I never," Crystal started, then stopped, as Leon began laying documents on the table. Bank statements, screenshots, hotel receipts, a detailed forensic accounting report highlighted in sharp yellow streaks. The evidence accumulated like bricks in a wall. $19,000, Leon continued. "That's how much of your original debt was connected to Troy Sewell. I've spent 3 years working 3 jobs to pay off the cost of your affair. An affair that started before we were even married." Crystal's face cycled through expressions: shock, denial, anger. "You went through my private—" "The group chat was enlightening," Leon interrupted, laying down more screenshots. "All those messages about my blue-collar energy. Your timeline for divorcing me once you hit the next level. The jokes about how I'd never know about Troy because I was too busy working to notice." Crystal whirled toward Philip. "You showed him? My own brother?" Philip met her gaze steadily. "You turned into someone I don't recognize anymore, Crystal. I tried to tell you what you were doing was wrong. You told me to stay in my lane. Well, this is me picking a lane." Crystal's hands trembled. She switched tactics, her eyes filling with tears. "Leon, please, I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. We can get counseling. We can—" Leon slid a final document across the table. Divorce papers, already bearing his signature. The house goes on the market next month, he said calmly. My attorney will contact yours. I start my new position at Walter Banks's firm on Monday. He stood up, buttoning his jacket with precise movements. This isn't a negotiation, Crystal. This is a notification. Leon, Crystal's voice cracked. Please, I made mistakes, but we can… Leon turned to face her fully. His voice, when it came, was soft but final. You told someone I was your slave. I need you to understand. That was the last thing you ever took from me. He picked up his keys from the counter. Aunt Georgia rose from her corner, her silence still perfect and damning. Leon walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the morning air. He stood on the front step for a moment, drawing in a slow breath, then walked to his car without looking back. Leon walked through the gleaming glass doors of Walter Banks Engineering at precisely 8 a.m. Monday morning. The security guard, checking his new ID badge, smiled warmly. Welcome aboard, Mr. Whitfield. The elevator carried him to the 14th floor. Walter stood waiting, his familiar weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. Right on time, as always. He gestured down the hallway. Let me show you your office. The corner office had floor-to-ceiling windows that would catch the afternoon sun. A sleek desk, empty bookshelves waiting to be filled, and a small conference table filled the space. It wasn't extravagant, but it was earned. Leon set his laptop bag down carefully. Team meeting at 10, Walter said. Take some time to settle in. Leon stood at the window for a moment, watching the city wake up. No need to rush. For the first time in 3 years, he had just one job to focus on. That same morning, across town, Crystal's phone buzzed with an urgent message from her broker. The sellers of her $1.4 million listing wanted an immediate meeting. She arrived to find not just the sellers, but also her broker and the firm's legal counsel waiting. The sellers' faces were tight with barely contained anger. Would you care to explain, the husband asked, sliding a printed article across the table, why your associate Troy Sewell is under investigation for financial irregularities, and why your name appears connected to his dealings? Crystal's stomach dropped. She reached for the article with trembling fingers. Beaumont Aldridge, described as Troy's primary investor, had initiated a comprehensive audit of all business relationships and transactions. This is a misunderstanding, Crystal started, but her broker cut her off. Until this situation is clarified, he said firmly, the firm is implementing a performance review structure. All your current and potential listings will require senior agent oversight. Your client access will be limited. The sellers stood up. We'll be listing with another agency, the wife said flatly. One without these complications. Crystal watched her largest commission evaporate. Her phone buzzed again. Troy, probably with his own crisis. She ignored it. Her carefully constructed exit strategy, built on projected income she no longer had access to, began crumbling. She called Adrienne, desperate for the comfort of familiar support. Crystal? Adrienne's voice was hesitant. I was actually going to call you. Everything's falling apart, Crystal said. I can't do this anymore, Adrienne cut in quietly. I've been part of something wrong, and I can't keep pretending it's okay. Crystal sat up straighter. What are you talking about? The group chat. The things we said. The things I let you say about Leon without speaking up. I warned you once, remember? I told you how you were treating him wasn't right. You laughed it off. Adrienne? No. Adrienne's voice hardened. I'm not standing beside you on this one. What you did was cruel, and I was wrong to stay quiet about it. I can't be your friend and like who I am at the same time anymore. The line went dead. Crystal stared at her phone, another support beam collapsing. Meanwhile, Leon's first week flowed with the steady rhythm of focused work. His engineering skills, sharp despite 3 years away, earned quiet nods of approval from his colleagues. By Friday's team meeting, Walter's public praise felt earned rather than charitable. Leon's analysis of the Thompson Project infrastructure saved us from a major redesign. Walter announced to the room, "This is exactly why I've been trying to get him back here for 2 years." Sunday evening found Leon pulling into his mother's driveway. The house smelled of pot roast and fresh bread. She'd been cooking all day, he realized. His mother opened the door before he could knock. She wrapped him in a fierce hug, then held his face between her hands. Her eyes said everything that didn't need words. "I'm sorry. I'm proud. You're home." They ate at the small kitchen table where he'd done homework as a boy. She filled his plate twice, watched him eat with maternal satisfaction, and told him stories about his cousin's children until the kitchen grew dark. "You look better," she said finally. "You look like yourself again." Driving home that night, Leon kept the windows down. The spring air moved through the car like something alive. No schedule pressed against his thoughts. No second job waited. No rideshare app demanded his attention. He drove simply to drive, moving through the darkness like a man who had reclaimed his own time, his own breath, his own life. The city lights blurred past like stars, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt the simple pleasure of having nowhere urgent to be. 1 year later, the fluorescent lights of the 24-hour diner cast the same pale glow across the worn tabletop. Leon sat in the corner booth where he had eaten countless pre-dawn breakfasts during those grinding years of 3 jobs. The window beside him reflected the interior rather than showing the darkness outside. His coffee steamed in the same thick ceramic mug they'd always used, but the man holding it was different now. A draft of his conference speech lay beside his notepad. Walter had insisted on introducing him personally at the regional engineering conference that weekend. "Best hire I've made in 15 years, he'd said, refusing to let anyone else do the honors. The recognition felt earned rather than granted. Leon's redesign of the Thompson infrastructure had saved the firm millions and established his reputation beyond question. He glanced at his watch. 4:47 a.m. The same time he used to arrive here between his rideshare shift and HVAC work. Now he came because he chose to, because he enjoyed the quiet of pre-dawn hours when his mind was sharpest. His apartment across town waited in comfortable silence, a second-floor corner unit he'd chosen specifically for how the afternoon sun filled the space. No elaborate decorations, no carefully curated image, just clean lines, comfortable furniture, and walls lined with engineering books he actually read. Everything in it was his alone, purchased with single-job earnings and arranged according to his own taste. The Sunday morning calls with Aunt Georgia had become a ritual. She took full credit for the whole thing with anyone who would listen, but her real pride showed in quieter ways. Like how she'd started asking his advice about her own financial decisions, treating his judgment as something earned and valuable. Philip's friendship had evolved into something genuine, built on shared interests rather than shared history. They met for basketball games, argued about sports statistics, and never mentioned Crystal unless absolutely necessary. It was better that way. His phone showed a text from his mother about next Sunday's dinner. She still cooked too much, still watched him eat with maternal satisfaction, but the worry had left her eyes. She saw him sleeping full nights, working one job he loved, building a life that fit him properly. The waitress, Marie, her name tag read, approached with the coffee pot. "Refill, hun." Leon nodded, sliding his mug closer. "Thanks. You're here early," she said, filling the cup. "I like the quiet," he replied. "Best time to think." She glanced at his notepad covered in precise technical drawings. "Building something?" "Always." He smiled, gesturing at the complex system design he'd been sketching for a new project. Engineering problems were cleaner now, unburdened by exhaustion or divided attention. His mind moved through them with a clarity he'd forgotten he possessed. Across town, In a neighborhood she once would have described as transitional, Crystal woke up in her one-bedroom rental. The smaller brokerage where she now worked demanded weekly performance reports and maintained strict oversight of her client interactions. Her commission structure was a fraction of what she'd once commanded. Troy had moved on months ago, his own professional complications requiring a strategic retreat from any connection that might draw additional scrutiny. The carefully maintained social circle she'd built, funded by Leon's three-job income, had contracted almost to nothing. No more luxury spa weekends, no more exclusive dinner parties, no more carefully curated Instagram moments. She wasn't destroyed. She had enough to live on, a roof over her head, and her license was still valid. But she was reduced to exactly what she had built for herself, without the foundation of Leon's quiet labor beneath it. The life she'd dismissed as blue-collar had been funding the image she couldn't maintain alone. Back in the diner, Leon added another detail to his system design. The project was complex, but elegant, the kind of challenge that made engineering feel less like work and more like solving an intricate puzzle. He'd forgotten, during those 3 years of grinding survival, how much he genuinely loved this work. Marie passed by again, this time carrying plates to another early customer. "Need anything else?" "Just the quiet," Leon said, smiling briefly before returning to his work. The pre-dawn darkness pressed against the window beside him. His reflection looked back, steady, unhurried, free. The man in the glass was familiar now, restored to himself. He took a slow sip of coffee and turned back to his drawings, adding another precise line to the design taking shape on the page. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.